So, part 2. What evidence have I seen that leads me to the conclusion the Catholic Church is guilty of a systematic cover-up of child rape? As is usual from the devout, in the comments section for the most malevolent force on earth, I was accused of taking things out of context. So, since context is so important, let's provide some. And let's start not with Raztinger, but go back nearly 50 years to John the 23rd, and a letter that he sent out in 1962. I've put a link in the description box so you can read the Guardian article and look at a PDF of the Vatican document. There's 39 pages of this stuff, so luckily for us, someone has rather helpfully highlighted the relevant bits. In this letter, we see that one acceptable solution for dealing with the rapists of children is for the offender to be transferred to another assignment, something that we know happened time and time again. We see that anyone involved in the case is sworn to absolute secrecy under penalty of excommunication. Again, that's something that survivors of rape have testified as being the case. We see that this swearing to secrecy does not apply only to the clergy, but to accusers and witnesses. That even if the accused admits to the crimes, the onus is on the victim to continue with their denunciation. Presumably, if the victim decides to stop, then the case is dropped and all records destroyed, as per papal directive. And just how much pressure do you think a child will be under to drop these accusations? We see that the truth is apparently less important than secrecy. And just in case it's not clear enough, yet more instruction on secrecy. Naturally, the worst crime is homosexual rape. Heterosexual rape presumably being a lesser crime since A, it's not homosexuality, and B, it's only against females. Here we have the oath itself, to be taken by those participating in the church investigation, swearing them to papal secrecy. Secrecy at all costs at the risk of their immortal soul. This passage in itself invalidates any claim made by the Catholic Church that such swearing to secrecy only applies to the church court. It's very clear that this applies to anyone outside the immediate church proceedings. So now on to the Raztinger letter. I've put a link in the description box to the English translation. In this document, the then Cardinal Raztinger instructs how offences against the faith, including sexual misconduct by priests, should be processed. Raztinger refers specifically to the above 1962 letter and a review of its instructions. This means that the instructions in the 1962 letter were widely known to the Vatican hierarchy and to Raztinger. In the 2001 letter, Raztinger instructs that in tribunals established by ordinaries or hierarchs, the functions of judge, promoter of justice, notary, and legal representative can validly be performed for these cases only by priests. To me, this is very easily interpreted as meaning that it's not to be reported to the local law authorities, but to be dealt with by the church court, and that's certainly what happened. He also instructs that all tribunals of the Latin Church and Eastern Catholic churches are bound to observe the canons on delicts and penalties, and also on the penal process of both codes respectively, and that cases of this kind are subject to the pontifical secret. The pontifical secret being that if you blab, you will go to hell. Does this letter from Raztinger specifically forbid contacting the local authorities? Well, no it doesn't, but it builds on the 1962 letter sent out by John the 23rd, and that is the context that we need to consider here. It's clearly evident that the interpretation of the 1962 and 2001 letters were coloured by and continued the culture of secrecy and cover-up in the church when it came to dealing with matters of sex scandals. We're seeing case after case of abuse of children coming to light, horrific levels of harm inflicted on minors that's global in its scale and stretches back at least the length of a human lifetime, as elderly survivors of priestly rape have testified. It's also evident that covering up of these events isn't a rarity, and that cover-ups are encouraged. See the case of Cardinal, who praised a French priest who had refused to report another of his colleagues who'd been raping children. There's a link in the description box. So, evidence. Well, how much more evidence do you want? This may well not be enough so far to convict Raztinger in a criminal court beyond a reasonable doubt. But I think that it's likely it would be enough to convict him in a civil court based on the preponderance of the evidence. And numerous civil cases brought against the Catholic Church and the payments made by them seem to bear out that conclusion. The evidence is there that not only did the rape and abuse of children take place, but that child-raping priests were protected, and the appalling way in which these children were treated and denied justice was sanctioned by the Church, all the way to the top. The Church and the Catholic faithful are hoping that a few insincere apologies, token payments from their vast wealth, and crocodile tears from their clergy will satisfy those who are calling for justice and make it all go away so they can get back to business as usual. I'm hoping for just the opposite, that those responsible are held to account for their actions, or, just as importantly, inaction. As for Ratzinger's personal culpability and the attempts to protect him by blaming his predecessors and such, well, to be told that Ratzinger knew nothing of this is insulting. In one comment I referred to him as politically astute, and I was called out on that. How do I know he was politically astute? I was asked. Well, my evaluation of his political savvy is based on the fact that here we have a man who has managed to clamber his way to the top of the greasy pole in one of the most ruthlessly political and powerful organisations on the planet. That didn't happen by chance. No one is that lucky. Not even God.